Jesus said to his disciples, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He takes away every branch in me that does not bear fruit, and every one that does he prunes, so that it bears more fruit. You are already pruned because of the word that I spoke to you. Remain in me, as I remain in you. Just as a branch cannot bear fruit on its own unless it remains on the vine, so neither can you unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever remains in me and I in him will bear much fruit, because without me you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me will be thrown out like a branch and wither. People will gather them and throw them into a fire, and they will be burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask for whatever you want, and it will be done for you. By this is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Bible trivia question for everyone today. Who said, my God, why have you abandoned me?" What is that? All right, Jesus, very good. All right, everybody passed. All right, excellent. Okay, good job. All right, I would have been pretty concerned, right, if we didn't pass that. Okay, all right. So Jesus said it on the cross. He said, my God, why have you abandoned me?" And the deeper question, that's a little more difficult to answer, is why? Why did Jesus say, my God, why have you abandoned me? Did Jesus really feel abandoned? Was he actually despairing of God's existence or of his Father's love for him? Why did he say that on the cross? That wasn't the only time in the Gospels where it seemed like Jesus maybe was not knowing something, or maybe falling into despair. And so for that reason, in the early days of the church, some people began to question Jesus' divinity. If he is God, how could he possibly feel abandoned on the cross? How could he be in despair? Or if he is God, how were there times in his earthly ministry where he seemed to be asking questions he didn't know the answer to? Maybe he was not actually God. This is called the Arian heresy. The creed we recite every Sunday. It's the Nicene Creed. We get that from the Council of Nicaea, which was to address the Arian heresy. Arius said something like, well, maybe Jesus is just the highest of all creatures. So therefore he doesn't know everything, but he knows more than everybody else. Even though he's not actually God, he has more power than anybody else, and that's why he could do miracles. Arius famously said that there was a time where Jesus was not, because he was a creature. And from that, we get the Council of Nicaea, which rebuked this heresy. So every Sunday in the Creed, we say that Jesus became man, and he is true God from true God. He is begotten from all eternity. He is not made. He's not created. He is light from light, true God from true God. He really is God. And in the early church, in the 400s, a lot of people were beginning to believe this Arian heresy. They were beginning to think that maybe Jesus was not actually God. This is part of the reason why Islam was able to spread so much in the Middle East when it came about. Because it's basically the same idea. Jesus is like this special person, but he's not really God. That's what Islam teaches. In the Middle Ages, the church began to rebuke this heresy, and the church always emphasized the divinity of Jesus in such a way that it almost seemed to overshadow his humanity. And in our modern age, people are starting to do the opposite. they begin to question the divinity of Jesus, only to emphasize his humanity. That's why I hear people say things like, well, maybe Jesus was just maybe he was just a good teacher. Maybe he was a wise thinker. But he wasn't actually God. He was just teaching the same thing that Buddha taught and any other great religious thinkers. This emphasis on the humanity of Jesus. It was kind of funny when I was going through seminary because I got to see kind of the long results of this idea, right? And so if you think that Jesus is just like everybody else, then you're probably going to question all the miracles that are mentioned in the Bible as well, right? And that's basically what happened in the last 200 years in academia and theology schools. They question the miracles of Jesus. So they say that, Jesus didn't actually cast out demons. He just encountered people who were psychologically ill. And he was like a great psychologist. Or my personal favorite, the one that I thought was the most humorous in the seminary was, some theologians, they would say, we talk about Jesus multiplying the bread and the fish for the 5,000 people, but the miracle wasn't really that he multiplied the bread and the fish, it was that he got everybody to share with one another. It's kind of silly, right? What kind of a miracle is that? But I kid you not, this is something that is happening in theology schools. The Jesus Seminar from about 30 years ago, right? They basically disbanded all the miracles that Jesus ever did. They tried to explain them away. Or if any of you have ever been to Thomas Jefferson's home, remember he had his own Bible where he basically excluded all the stories of the miracles. And so we can laugh about this and we can say it's silly, but the truth is that you and I, whether we realize it or not, we've been affected by the same manner of thinking. This humanizing of Jesus, excluding his divinity. Part of the reason why we experience so much secularization in our culture is because people have lost faith in the divinity of Jesus. That he truly is different from any other religious founder. We call it the secularization of our culture. And that's why we're no longer allowed to pray in schools. That's one of the reasons why we no longer have Sunday as a sacred day. We're filling it up with all sorts of other secular kinds of things. And even in the church, I think you could make an argument that we experience a secularization. Many people, when they think about the church, when they think about the faith, they no longer think about the high aspects of theology. We no longer build our churches to reach to the skies. We build them to be functional, almost like a town hall kind of a structure. When we think about how we address the sacraments, in many ways the church used to be much more protective of how the Blessed Sacrament, for example, was handled. And now we are much more relaxed with how we handle the Blessed Sacrament. It's probably the reason why 70% of Catholics, according to studies, no longer believe in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. They basically believe what every other denomination believes, that it's just some kind of symbolic bread and symbolic wine. We've all experienced this secularization in the church. And it's probably, if we're honest, it's probably even affected how we think about the faith. What does it matter if I miss Mass from time to time? Or what does it matter if I never go to confession? At least I'm a good person. I'm a good citizen. I'm nice to people. Is that not the secularization of our faith? Downplaying the invisible aspects. Downplaying the divinity aspect of the church in favor of things that are much more worldly minded, secularly focused. Now I bring up all of this today because it is a good question. How do we address this problem? If Jesus said, my God, why have you abandoned me? Maybe he really wasn't true God from true God. Maybe he wasn't light from light. Spoiler alert, I don't think that's actually the case, thankfully. Why did he say that on the cross? Well, it turns out that in the Bible, there is another place where those words are spoken. Anybody know where it's spoken? In the Psalms. Psalm 22. Psalm 22. It might be familiar to you because on Good Friday we actually read Psalm 22, except we only read the first half. And guess how it begins? My God, why have you abandoned me? It's the beginning of the psalm. See, in the days of Jesus, they didn't talk about the Psalms by their number. You and I, today, we're used to our Bibles, which have chapter divisions and verse divisions. But in the days of Jesus, none of that existed. It didn't come around until the Middle Ages. So when you wanted to quote a passage from the Scriptures, you didn't quote a chapter and verse. You quoted the words. And when it came to the Psalms, you quoted the first line. You wouldn't say, and now we're going to recite Psalm 22. You'd say, now we're going to recite, my God, why have you abandoned me? Think about that. Even with our hymns today. Most of you, I'm guessing, when you talk about your favorite hymns to people from church, you probably don't say what number they are in the hymnal. You say what their title is, which is often the first line of the song. And that's exactly what the Jews did back in the days of Jesus. So when Jesus said on the cross, my God, why have you abandoned me? He was beginning the recitation of Psalm 22. And everybody would have known that. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, they prayed the Psalms every day. They would have known exactly what he was referring to. And it turns out that in Psalm 22, as the psalm begins, it is very much a psalm of despair, of sadness. It's almost like a prophecy about the crucifixion. It says, my God, why have you abandoned me? I cry all day long, but you do not answer. I am despised and scorned by men who see me and mock at me. They say that he committed his cause to the Lord, so let him deliver him. Let him rescue him. Lord, be not far from me, for trouble is near. I am poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. My strength is completely dried up. Dogs are round about me, evildoers encircle me. They have even pierced my hands and my feet. I can count every one of my bones. They divide my garments among them, and for my raiment they cast lots. Sounds like a crucifixion, right? Well, today, on the fifth Sunday of Easter, we heard the second half of Psalm 22. It sounds a lot different. It's a psalm of thanksgiving for God's deliverance. All the ends of the earth shall remember the power of the Lord. All the earth shall bow down to him. Men shall tell of the Lord to the coming generation, and they shall proclaim his deliverance to a people yet unborn. It ends with the psalmist recognizing that even though he thought that he was completely lost, God saved him in the end. And that's exactly what Jesus wanted everybody standing around the cross to hear. That even though it seemed like everything was lost, that God was about to deliver him, raising him from the dead. And that soon all the earth would worship the one true God who had risen from the dead. Just when everything seemed completely forsaken, God's deliverance was about to come. It's the message of Psalm 22. And maybe all of us in church this morning, maybe there are some of you who feel like the first half of Psalm 22. You feel lost. You feel despairing. You feel like all is dark. You don't know where you're going. Perhaps there is hope that God is just about to deliver you and bring you into the light.